Welcome to the Target stream for MintPress News. I'm your host, Robert Inlakesh. As always, thanks to everyone for joining us. Now, Israel has just announced its expansion of the war in Lebanon as the front is active as ever, with a new weapon having been just introduced to the battlefield. And as this is going on, it's going to have major implications on US-Iran negotiations. But before we begin getting into all of that and much more, this live stream and all the work we do at MintPress is supported by our members. So we call on you to join us for as little as $5 per month on Patreon. We were banned on PayPal and GoFundMe and had our fundraisers taken down and targeted by the Israel lobby and an Israeli OnlyFans model. So we need your support to keep MintPress alive so that we can continue exposing the stories that the corporate media refuses to touch. Just so everyone is aware, we are now doing these live streams every Monday and Thursday at 4 p.m. CST going forward. So that's twice per week. So make sure to catch us on Thursday as well. With that being said, now at this time, the Israelis are indeed escalating in Lebanon, and this is throwing the fate of the Iran negotiations with the United States into the meat grinder. So Netanyahu has openly declared that he's going to escalate and quote unquote crush Hezbollah. And he claims to have killed hundreds upon hundreds of Hezbollah fighters. At least he did in his speech during the ceasefire period, which is interesting because the United States has been claiming, according to the Times of Israel, US officials told them that Hezbollah had a number of opportunities to cease fire and simply didn't. And of course, the United States is trying to blame the escalation on Hezbollah. And we heard as well earlier today, the US is likely to greenlight larger Israeli operations. And it's not against Hezbollah, it's against southern Lebanon. And now all of Lebanon, they're trying to claim that this is about Hezbollah. But the reality is they're not actually fighting Hezbollah. And sometimes this analysis is a little bit controversial because people say, how can you claim that they're not fighting Hezbollah? They're not. They're blowing up civilian homes. They're bombing civilian areas. And if they were actually a real army capable of fighting on the ground, then they would be going after Hezbollah, but they don't. For example, as we're going to get into in this show, Hezbollah fires its FPV drones, starts using them against Israeli military positions, and suddenly this has disrupted, we hear, between 70 all the way up to 90%, according to the Israeli media, of Israeli operations in South Lebanon. So they've withdrawn troops out of South Lebanon. They've withdrawn from military positions, retreated, because a few drones are coming every day and hitting their troops. So the Israelis, of course, they're not actually fighting Hezbollah. What they're doing and what they seek to do is to carve out what they call a buffer zone. And this is the same thing they did, by the way, for anyone that's wondering. Historically, after 1982, when they invaded Lebanon, they killed between 15 to 20,000 Palestinians and Lebanese. Then they remained inside of South Lebanon. After the PLO left, they agreed, we'll disarm, our leadership will leave, all the things that they ask of Hezbollah and Hamas today. And they said, yeah, we'll leave. And they did. And then Israel used its fascist militia allies to commit massacres against civilians in the refugee camps and against, of course, the Lebanese Shia as well as the Palestinians. So what it did after that is up until 1985, the Israelis, they declared a buffer zone, which turned into a formal occupation of the territory where they used a group called the South Lebanon Army as their proxy forces in order to maintain that illegal occupation. So Israel wants to occupy southern Lebanese territory, but Israel is taking a beating. And because it's taking a beating, it's not doing too well. And it's not achieving its goals. And now it's frustrated. And also, Iran and the United States are in negotiations. Israel doesn't really like that, even how that appears. So here Israel comes along to crush that. But of course, as well, the United States, as the as the lapdog that it is, this Trump administration, it bars Abbas Araghchi from the UN. And of course, Donald Trump can't stop escalating and can't stop following orders. And the problem that he has is that there is no image of victory for him. Now, what Trump could do here is he could just walk away. The United States has the ability to simply walk away from the conflict if it wants to, and just, give Iran sort of what it wants, bow down to a few key demands and depart from the region and then declare a victory. Trump can declare a victory out of anything. I mean, he still claims that they destroyed the majority of Iran's missile forces, the majority of their air defenses. These are still things that Trump is claiming, but the Israelis can't, and this is the problem. Israel won't allow Trump to simply say goodbye and wash his hands of everything, because the Israelis wanted this war. This is a war for Israel, and now the Israelis, they have no way out with Lebanon. No way out. So they had two options before them: withdraw from southern Lebanon completely, abide by the ceasefire, allow for a cessation of hostilities regionally, and then, pursue different avenues. But the other way for the Israelis was to go on an all-out offensive inside Lebanon and to escalate again. And that is, of course, what they are doing. They are declaring all-out war in Lebanon, despite the fact that there's supposed to be a ceasefire that they keep breaking every single day, all day. And you might note, how many Israeli non-combatants have Hezbollah killed during this ceasefire period? You'll find that the answer to that is 0. All of those that have been killed and injured by Hezbollah during the ceasefire period have been either Israeli soldiers or the so-called civilian contractors who get paid danger money and escorted by the army to go into Lebanese villages and to blow up their homes. So there's nobody that Hezbollah is targeting that is a civilian. On the other hand, in the past few days, Israel has killed, I believe, 9 paramedics. Some of them on camera. It's on film, them targeting them. That's what Israel is doing. So, all of that being said, this is the southern suburbs of Beirut. About an hour ago, I believe, when Israel declared that it would bomb Beirut again. So it's going to go back to its terror bombings of Beirut, most likely throughout the Bekaa Valley, and then maybe even further north inside of Lebanon. But it's very likely that Dahia will be hit, perhaps during this live stream. So we'll try and provide you some updates on that. Again, this is footage of civilians leaving Dahia, the southern suburbs of Beirut, because Israel has threatened them again. Israel threatened to bomb the Lebanese capital. And this, by the way, is ongoing. And there are evacuation orders that have been issued in the past few days for Sur and different areas in Tyre in the south of Lebanon. And the people have to leave their homes, or else their homes are going to get bombed and they're going to get killed. Not only that, because the Israelis are not just targeting Lebanon, they're also targeting Gaza as well. And a building, and there's not that many of these buildings left in the Gaza Strip, in Nusayrat camp, was threatened today. And just a few hours ago, the civilians living inside that building had to flee onto the streets and try and find tents to live in. And of course, the Israelis did not allow reconstruction material into the Gaza Strip, which they were supposed to do as per the ceasefire agreement that they agreed to. But as everyone watching this stream knows by now, to Israel, ceasefire means you cease, we fire, and that's how they take it. So with the United States claiming that Hezbollah is responsible for violating the ceasefire and all of this, well, what about what is happening in Gaza? Because there is in the Gaza Strip what's called the Civil Military Coordination Center. And so this, which is supposed to be under the supervision, under the control of CENTCOM, but of course, CENTCOM, or as I like to call it during the Iran war times, it's become COPCOM, they have no autonomy whatsoever because CENTCOM is just Israel. Apparently in this case, it's Israel's sovereign command. And they just vanish whoever they want. They kicked Spain out of this CMCC. And the CMCC's role, by the way, is to monitor the ceasefire in the Gaza Strip. And they're supposed to watch out for violations of this ceasefire. And there's over 20 different countries that are part of the CMCC. And yet, none of these countries do anything. All of them bow down to their masters and allow the Israelis watching it on screen. They're seeing it. Now, these countries before, you could claim that these countries before, maybe they didn't know what's happening. Well, all of these nations now are there in coordination rooms, monitoring 24/7, looking at what's happening in Gaza and watching Israel bomb civilians, shoot civilians, watching as Israel with full information, full awareness, watching as they block humanitarian goods from coming into the Gaza Strip, watching as they block food, watching as they block the supplies, medical supplies and temporary housing, watching as the people of the Gaza Strip are dying from preventable illnesses, diseases, infections. They're watching it. So when we hear from the United States and these European so-called governments, these European puppets, and the rest of them, the Arabs as well, about Hezbollah's ceasefire violations, it's really pathetic. It's pathetic because at the end of the day, here you are watching your ally that's supposed to be the good guys who don't violate ceasefires. You're watching them in real time commit war crimes against civilians in Gaza and doing nothing about it whatsoever. And then in the case of Lebanon, if we go back all the way to the start, because I'm going to show some of the footage that has come out, and everything that we're going to show here today has come out since last Thursday alone. There was so much footage that Hezbollah is releasing of what's going on the battlefield. But if we go back to October 8th, and October 8th is when Hezbollah first began firing on the Israelis, there is a claim, well, Hezbollah started this war because Hezbollah started firing upon the Israelis and violated the ceasefire agreement and violated the UN resolution and the blue line. That's what we heard. But the reality was that Hezbollah fired into the Sheba Farms and the Ghajar village area. That's where they were. And by the way, Hezbollah fighters had put up tents in the Ghajar village area, which was illegally occupied by the Israelis prior to October 7th, because Israel was building a wall and security fence inside Lebanese territory to the point where they were having standoffs with the Lebanese military. And so Hezbollah actually was firing into its own occupied territory and was targeting as well, mainly surveillance equipment. When Israel began killing civilians, including journalists, medics and emergency workers inside of Lebanese territory, Hezbollah started firing back. But it took them some time before they started firing rockets at Israeli settlements, for example. They were targeting almost exclusively throughout the months, all the way in the lead up to the war that Israel started with Lebanon in September of 2024, after their terrorist pager attack, their indiscriminate pager attacks, and their assassination of the senior leadership of Hezbollah. And by the way, with the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the former Secretary General of Hezbollah, they openly said that their estimates were that there would be roughly 300 civilians in order to kill him. 300 civilians. Israel openly said that there were going to be 300 casualties amongst civilians for killing Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. But let's go back, okay? So Hezbollah did not actually start firing on Israeli territory, what under international law is considered to be, Israel's territory, because Israel has never declared its borders. So Hezbollah did not fire on Israeli territory first. It was the opposite way around. The Israelis fired on Lebanese territory first. These are the facts. These are the facts. You may not like them, but they are the facts. Now, when Israel aggressed and Israel decided to kill some 5,000 people inside of Lebanon and to force a war upon Lebanon, a major war upon Lebanon, because the entire time, Hezbollah, which had not engaged in warfare despite countless provocations and thousands of violations of Lebanese sovereignty since 2006, when the Israelis chose to go to war, Hezbollah had said repeatedly, we don't want war, openly in all of their statements. If you see the statements they put out, they said, we want an end to the genocide in Gaza. That is why we're fighting as a support front. That is openly what they professed. And everything else they said was in response, in self-defense. The language they used was not, we're going to annihilate an entire city, we're going to take out a civilization. All of that language, that genocidal rhetoric, came from the Israeli side. You don't hear that from the side of Hezbollah. And you can go and check their statements because I follow them all. Where are the statements from Hezbollah, we're going to annihilate an entire civilization? Can you find anything genocidal like that? No, of course you can't. And here we are in this scenario where we're hearing, front is back, everything is inverse. Now, if you look at what's been happening more recently, since the ceasefire was imposed on November 27, 2024 in Lebanon, there were 15,400 ceasefire violations by the Israelis. You want to take a guess about how many violations Hezbollah committed during that 15-month period? 0. Nothing. Nothing at all. And Israel just kept bombing the south and killing civilians, and targeting journalists, and targeting medical workers, and targeting hospitals, and targeting mosques, and targeting schools anytime it wanted. And it would even bomb Beirut occasionally and have its fighter jets and its drones constantly over the Lebanese capital. And then here comes the United States saying, well, we want for Hezbollah to cease fire. Well, that is not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And one of the reasons why it's not going to happen is because Israel is being beaten militarily. That's why it's not going to happen. Now, Iran has issued a statement stating that if there is a major attack on Beirut, which is ordered already, this will perhaps collapse the ceasefire negotiations and the memorandum of understanding that's being put together, which I put it in quotation marks because I don't believe that the United States is genuine about anything when it comes to its commitments to the Iranian side in negotiations. But the Israelis The Israelis are doing this and will likely collapse those negotiations in order to reach some sort of a ceasefire settlement. And another interesting element to all of this is on the Iran front is today we heard from Bloomberg that Iran managed to shoot down 30 MQ-9 Reaper drones since February, since the war started in February 28th, costing around $1 billion and depleting 20% of the US's pre-war inventory. This is something major for the United States, is that this war that they've waged, they've wasted an enormous amount of their arsenal, their stockpiles, which will take, in some cases, up to a decade to fully restore to the pre-war levels. Having said all of that, we're going to start to get into some of the footage that has been released as we monitor what's going on right now with Israel and its strikes, which are ongoing, by the way, across southern Lebanon. There have been major attacks. Interestingly, there seems to be also right now emerging strikes that are taking place on Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. Iranian media are also saying 2 boats belonging to the IRGC were attacked by enemy fighters while carrying out a mission in the Persian Gulf. So it does appear that there is some sort of an attack ongoing against Iran in the south there, inside the Persian Gulf, as Israel is escalating its airstrikes against Lebanon. However, it is important to show what's been going on the ground, because the reason why Israel is escalating right now against Lebanon is because there's been some pretty damning developments, and they have failed, the Israelis so far, to effectively combat Hezbollah's FPV drones. And more recently, there was just footage, and this was revealed actually in the earlier today by Hezbollah, that their FPV drones are now equipped with thermal night vision. And so here's this clip, which was again released today. The Israelis, by the way, have been denying that Hezbollah have this equipment, and denying that they're able to carry out attacks like this at night. But you're seeing right here, and some Israeli media even tried to deny that they had a video after it was published that they were going to release this. But as you can see here, this is the drone, and there are 2 Israeli soldiers there, and there is a direct hit right there on one of those soldiers with the FPV drone, the first-person view drone, unsuspecting and completely unaware what was coming his way. That sent shockwaves through the Israeli media, because they're already livid with the fact that the Israeli military was not prepared for this. And, you know, the Israelis don't really take casualties very well. Here's also some footage which came from the Israeli side, them filming it themselves. This is earlier today. This is a Hezbollah drone that appeared to have hit some kind of target. Often there are military assets that are hidden in the border settlements in these sort of areas, and are sort of camouflaged. But of course, we can't confirm what was hit or what was being targeted, and maybe it missed. We don't actually know for sure. But here is another attack. This is not an FPV drone. This is another kind of drone that Hezbollah have and fire frequently. And you'll see here, it hits the top of this building. And it's likely, because there are lots of soldiers that gather in these buildings, it's likely they may have targeted this specific building because of a military presence inside that building. Again, that's not confirmed. And there is no confirmation on how many casualties there were. But at the very least, this puts the Israelis under a lot of strain. That's the same strike, by the way, 2 different angles, I believe. And this is in northern occupied Palestine. This is in the Galilee, the northern Galilee along the border. And this is what the Israelis are open to. The air defenses are completely collapsing and failing. Here, this footage was released by the Israeli military themselves during an attempt to extract. There's a strike. So Hezbollah were launching attacks on this Israeli position in South Lebanon, this is, while they were attempting to evacuate injured soldiers. And again, this sort of footage being leaked and published by the Israeli military itself is pretty damning, because they attempt to hide this sort of stuff normally. And as you'll see, all of these soldiers, like, they're equipped with cameras. A lot of them have GoPros on, their helmets, body cams. So you would think that we would see more footage coming from them inside southern Lebanon. And here at the end, they've got on top of the helicopter. This right here is just footage that I put in there from a medevac, which was filmed by the Israelis. I believe that helicopter is heading towards Haifa. Now, something to point out about what we just watched: the Israelis have these body cams, they have GoPros, a lot of them do, and yet we barely see any footage, not only from South Lebanon, but also we barely see any footage from Gaza. And a lot of people ask why that is. And there's 2 reasons for that. The first is that this footage, it will show them committing war crimes. Another reason is they don't want to reveal what's actually happening to them and how bad they've got it. Footage like this is released for political purposes. They want to put pressure on someone. They want to extract something by releasing this footage to show how they're under stress. And it's likely because the Israeli military was pushing for a larger wave of attacks on Lebanon, that this was released strategically to put pressure on the Netanyahu administration to authorize more force inside of Lebanon. That's one of the likely reasons why we've seen this footage. But another element is they're not fighting. Again, as I've said repeatedly, they are not fighting Hezbollah. Because if they were, then we would expect to see on these GoPros and on these body cams that they have, we would expect to see footage of, face-to-face confrontations. We would expect to see footage of clashes between the Israeli military, this invincible Israeli army, and Hezbollah fighters, and footage from them fighting inside of tunnels and building to building and all of the rest of this. We didn't see it in Gaza, and we sure as hell do not see it in Lebanon, because again, they don't fight. They have an air force, which no one can deny. They have an air force, they have sophisticated technology, and they have very good intelligence networks, for sure. No one disputes this. But as an army, they're not really an army. They're not really an army. They work well as an occupation police, glorified police force that bully children and bully civilians, and they don't know how to actually fight on the ground. And so they have a great problem with fighting men that aren't afraid to die and are confronting them with asymmetric warfare tactics, which again, we're going to look at more of the footage that has emerged here. So this right here, this footage that was released in Bayada, which is in South Lebanon, shows multiple drone attacks on the same military positions in the area, taking out Israeli military vehicles. And of course, there are logistical hubs, and also going after their their bases of communication. If you look at what, in terms of all of this footage is coming out, some of it was released separately, and then there was other footage that was released by itself. They're going after their equipment. They're not just trying to lob drones into any tank for the sake of it. They're choosing their targets very specifically. They're on the lookout for targets that are going to damage Israeli operations in the south. Here we go. They just showed their footage of rocket fire towards Israeli positions, and then the FPV drones hitting their targets. Again, here in that case, we saw them target a tank. But in a lot of the cases, we don't see them. They're sort of avoiding the Merkava tanks a little bit more now because they can't ensure that they will destroy it. But if you see these hits on these logistical hubs and hits on these military vehicles like the armored jeeps, as soon as those drones hit, it's a confirmed kill. That vehicle is toast. And again, what they're showing here is that it's not just the FPV drones. What they're also doing is they're launching other forms of drones, other kinds of drones that they have, but also rockets at their positions too. And another thing that they're utilizing is the guided anti-tank munitions. And they're hitting Israeli convoys, often when they're advancing. But what happens here is day in, day out, this is a taste of what the Israeli military is facing. And Hezbollah at this time is launching in the low 20s to the mid 30s operations per day. So there might be 25 operations one day, there might be 35 the next day. But this is, hourly attacks on their positions. And because these drones as well, they're not showing the reconnaissance that is done with these drones right here, but they're also doing reconnaissance as well. So they're monitoring these positions, and not just the Israeli military positions and bases that have been created in the south of Lebanon, but also on the other side of the border too. You'll see here as well that they're passing pretty quickly here. And again, targeting the Volvo there. These excavators and the equipment like that Volvo that you saw here, a lot of these are, you see, they're not military vehicles. The Israelis have developed their own private industry where the government is actually paying Israeli businesses and paying Israeli contractors to go out and to participate in both in the Gaza Strip and in Lebanon, in South Lebanon, in the destruction of Lebanese and Palestinian homes. And so those Volvos that you're seeing there that get struck, that's because the Israeli military in some cases didn't have access to enough of them. And so they turned to the private sector and they got on board and they started paying the Israeli businesses and citizens to come work and help them operate the machinery and to use their machinery, the machinery owned by private Israeli companies. But destroying that is a big burden on them because evidently they do need all of this help in their operations. So when we're seeing them target those Volvos there, like we saw in that video, it is actually important because the less that they have of these vehicles, the more difficult it is to sustain their operations. And their operations are based around destroying destroying Lebanese villages. They want to exact a price on the civilian population, and the purpose is ethnically cleansing them here and to commit mass murder. And in what it is now is we had the Dahiya doctrine before, which they developed, which was implemented in 2006 and afterwards. But now what we have is the genocide doctrine. It's just the obliteration doctrine, where they just destroy everything in front of them. Everything. And that is the objective, just make it unlivable. There's nothing to return to. But still that won't work because people will still return to their homes. And that being said, the Israelis have been lured into a trap in South Lebanon, one which they can't exactly get out of. Pull this up here. And these right here, just before, this is in Vintage Bale. This footage comes from this series of videos that was released by Hezbollah. They're all since Thursday. I've actually not included all of the videos that they've released because there are so many of them. But when you're looking and you're watching these here, it's good to keep in mind that the Israelis are under an enormous amount of pressure, not only because Hezbollah are conducting this many operations against them, hitting their military vehicles, hitting their soldier gatherings and going after them. Here, this logistical truck, and then that's a direct hit there. Here, this is a Menara settlement in northern occupied Palestine, and the drone enters with ease across the Israeli border. The air defenses stand no chance. They have no idea what is coming, and there the soldier is sprinting over here to try and get out of harm's way, not know that he's running into where the drone is heading, a few steps ahead of him. Again, this is on the same base, another drone. And as you're seeing, they can do absolutely nothing about it. And these videos put great strain on the Israeli society. The media complains a lot about the fact that Hezbollah can operate these drones freely, and they can't target the operators. And again, they choose their targets here because these drone operators are getting more and more experienced. They could have targeted, for instance, a Merkava tank, but instead of going after that, they're going to go after a vehicle that is more consequential, and also that they know they're going to detonate upon hitting it. This is again in Vintage Bale, which is occupied currently by the Israeli military. But again, when we get presented with these maps and the Israelis claim to have taken over territory, well, we're seeing what sort of control they have over this land here. And Hezbollah are a stone's throw away. In this case, they have targeted a Merkava tank. And look, when they hit the tanks, it's not guaranteed that with these smaller munitions, they're often like RPGs, these small explosive charges, that they will inflict a tank kill hit. Sometimes they do, depending upon where they hit on the tank precisely, but often they will not completely destroy the tank, but just damaging it does take it off the battlefield for sure. Here, this is another video that was released recently, and as you see, they've targeted this vehicle on the run, and it's just like hunting. These drones are hunting down their targets, and they do so. Let's go back here. They do so uncontested. There's no air defense fire. They haven't been picked up on. And this is, again, an Israeli settlement. This is on the other side of the Lebanese border, and this is what's driving Israel crazy. This is what's driving them crazy. This is what's pushing them towards going to all-out war with Lebanon, because again, they don't actually have any answers on the ground. Every single day, things are getting worse and worse for them. And we're seeing here, they are simply hunting Israeli targets, and no one is safe. And of course, when that drone impacted the vehicle there, that vehicle is totally destroyed. Although there's no confirmation. The second video confirming it, I can say with confidence that that was destroyed. This is in Taibe. This is this footage here. It's an armored personnel carrier and what appears to be a hit. And again, we don't have footage to confirm the damage there. However, again, these videos coming out, and it's all day, every day, it's constantly. The Israeli army themselves, the soldiers, are seeing these videos. And it is very intimidating because they know that at any moment they could be subjected to an FPV drone attack. And now they know that they can be targeted at nighttime as well, which makes it more difficult for them because it's more difficult to see the drone coming at you until it's too late. So the Israelis are in a very difficult position. One thing I wanted to bring up here and show was another compilation of attacks on Rashaf, on Israeli positions there in southern Lebanon. And this is a Merkava tank that they're targeting here, as you can see. And this is, again, a compilation of the different attacks that were carried out, some of them with swarms of drones at the same time, on Israeli military vehicles. They're targeting a Jeep. In this case, they're targeting soldiers that are holed up in this building. And again, you see the, like in some of these videos, you're seeing the netting that they're placing over their positions to try and catch these drones as they come in, but it is not successful. Again, that right there, you can see the result. This is the second drone coming over. And again, you see the result of the attack on that truck. And then this is a massive burden on the Israeli military because everything you lose, you have to replace it. And then when you sustain these sort of hits, you have to be on the move. You have to here's again the third drone heading in, I believe, for this attack here. As I was saying, you have to implement emergency and security protocols, and they are already taking enormous hits on a daily basis. So for them, they don't actually have an answer. Again, picking one of those Jeeps, and then that Jeep is gone. And each one of these pieces of equipment we're talking about here with these drones that are lightweight. There's no way to track the supply chain. The whole thing, the whole claim that you will hear coming out that the Israelis are trying to crack down on the supply and manufacturing of the pieces for these drones. It's impossible to do so. All you need is really a 3D printer, and you can put together these drones. Again, going after their equipment, going after their radars, going after their logistical hubs and vehicles, their soldier gatherings. Here, I believe this drone is not actually the fiber optic cable drone, if I'm not mistaken. This is the other kind, which technically could be jammed, but as you're seeing here, and it's not. But it carries a larger munition, if I'm not mistaken. And so the Israelis are in a very difficult predicament, because this is, for reference, I'll show you where this is on the map after we watch this footage here. But they're incapable of securing any positions. They're not defeating Hezbollah. They cannot eliminate the supply chain to create these drones. It's just simply impossible to do so. And they're losing tens of millions, well, at this point, hundreds of millions in equipment, most likely at this point, that they've lost because of Hezbollah using these cheap drones, which the lowest estimates are around $50 per unit. Some other estimates put them at $300 per unit. But these drones are, again, lightweight, easy to produce. You can produce them en masse. They're very, very cheap, cost effective. The fiber optic the ones using fiber optic cables cannot be jammed. And then you are just subjected to, as we're seeing here, this is an Israeli position. They claim that they have full operational control here in Reshef, in South Lebanon, but that's just not the case. It simply isn't the case. And then you see the netting that they have placed over these areas, and it's not effective, because the drone operators can get around it. I'm sure maybe it has caught one or two, if I had to guess, but it's evidently having little to no impact. And they don't like putting their soldiers out in the open, because, again, they like to have them hidden inside their vehicles and hidden away. It's very rare that you see the soldiers out, especially when they're on the move. They're not outside of their vehicles. They hide away inside these vehicles. Just so everyone is aware, I'm just going to pull up here to demonstrate where this is on the map. So Israel claims, it has all this great control in southern Lebanon, and it's only here. That's where that video was. That's where you were seeing all those FPV drones hitting vehicle after vehicle. And right here is the border. And in the last stream that we did here, there was footage that came out, and there was also a graphic that was produced by Hezbollah showing the confrontations in Hadassah, which the Israelis kept failing to advance into. And that was beyond the area that they declared was supposed to be part of their buffer zone, but they failed to take it. And then you just saw what happened for yourself, what has been happening to their forces in an area that they're supposed to have full control of. But they just don't. They simply don't. And the same here in Naqoura, they're also taking hits here too, although, they claim that, well, they have full control of that territory. The reality is they don't have control on the other side of the border in northern occupied Palestine. They don't have control. There's constant drones flying over. Today we got Shlomi. There was an attack with drones on this Israeli occupied settlement here. And the drone sirens are constant. They don't have full control over any area really in southern Lebanon. And that's because they haven't actually eliminated Hezbollah. They told the world for 15 months after declaring victory in South Lebanon and in Lebanon in general against Hezbollah, they told the world that they had cleared the south of the country and that there was no threat along the border. And yet here we are, and the Israelis are again launching a large wave of attacks across the country, threatening to blow up the southern suburbs of Beirut, because, again, they have no answer. And so, having said that, I wanted to also show these two clips here, which were put together, which show Hezbollah, some of the other kinds of operations they're doing, because we're looking at a lot of FPV drone attacks, but also there's the attacks which we don't see footage of the results of them, and they are these artillery and rocket attacks that they're carrying out around the clock against Israeli forces. And see, the Israelis will not often admit any casualties in these attacks that you're seeing here. Yet these are going on. These are frequent throughout the day. They're announced time and time again, very often on Israeli soldier positions in southern Lebanon. And we hear a little in the way of admissions from the Israelis about what damage is being done here. And it was the same way in 2024. The Israelis simply just did not acknowledge what was happening in the south of the country when they invaded South Lebanon. Here you're seeing them about ready to fire, and they fire these rockets and then the mortars as well at Israeli soldier positions. And these fighters, these Hezbollah fighters, are everywhere in the south. And they're popping up, carrying out these attacks on Israeli soldier positions. And we're talking frequently about the FPV drones, but there's also, a lot of the fighting involves these mortar attacks, the rocket attacks, and the use of other kinds of drones as well that have been supplied by Iran, or at least the blueprints, because I believe that they do make a lot of different drone variations also inside of Lebanon itself, because they have their own domestic industry. So here's the rocket fire. And again, we're seeing at nighttime, they're doing the same thing. They're firing rockets on Israeli military positions, and they have spotters so that they know they can communicate to them. Here's another one that has emerged again since last Thursday. Everything I'm showing you here has come out, has been released since last Thursday when we did the last stream here. And we hear nothing about this. The Israelis don't admit it. And the reason they don't, again, despite the fact that they all have these GoPros on their heads, the reason we don't hear anything about it is because they can get away with covering up their losses. So they do. But as we're seeing, there are these massive rocket bursts towards their positions in southern Lebanon. And they're constantly under pressure. They constantly have to be on the move. And for them to advance is even more difficult because they'll come under even more fierce attacks. And I thought that this would be important to actually show, because this footage does come out a lot. This is a compilation of those videos. But this footage does emerge quite a bit, but it often gets slept on because everyone is, of course, focusing on the FPV drones, because they show you there's no way to dispute the outcome of those FPV drone attacks in a lot of cases. We know that they hit their targets. You can see it up until the last moment. And of course, they are the weapon that has sort of changed the battlefield and is inflicting an enormous amount of soldier casualties every day. And the Israelis really are suffering an enormous amount of casualties. But see, Israel claims to have controlled all of this territory in southern Lebanon, and yet they're loading rocket launchers onto the back of trucks and firing them on Israeli military positions not too far away from them. So, at the end of the day, and here we go again with the mortar rounds. And again, the Israeli media has little to say about this. And apparently they're fighting Hezbollah and they're beating them. And according to Netanyahu, they've killed 600 Hezbollah fighters. No evidence for that, of course. No evidence for that whatsoever. But again, the Israelis work on cope and nonsense. And while they're getting beaten to bits. And that's what's happening to them. I wanted to pull up this footage here because this is actually from 2024, but it shows what was happening back then as well, because there's a range of different munitions that Hezbollah has, and they include the anti-tank guided missiles, the likes of the Almas system. Again, this is from 2024, but just to give an example of the kinds of attacks, this is on an Israeli settlement, again, across the border. They're able to carry out these attacks with these, it's called the Almas system, which was a reverse, the Iranians reverse engineered the Israeli spike system. And these attacks can also be carried out. We're not seeing too much of it, and the FPV drones are a lot cheaper. But this is the missile hitting a target. And so here again, you see the guided missile fired. And in this case, it is going to impact between two Israeli soldiers. And again, this is in northern occupied Palestine in the Galilee. And the Israelis weren't admitting some of these casualties at the time, and then the videos would emerge and they would have to admit them. Of course, the reason why I'm showing this here, because this footage is from back in 2024, the reason I'm showing this is because they have the potential to launch other kinds of guided munitions across the border and to hit their targets. And they can do so in the event that tensions are to continue to escalate. They have more options than simply the FPV drones. It's not just that they are limited to. So it does appear here as we're watching this. So that was just a reference. I just wanted to show that was from back in 2024. As the stream is ongoing, there's been more attacks on South Lebanon. Israel, again, for those who are just tuning in, has escalated its war against Lebanon, is threatening to bomb Beirut. And we're hearing air defense fire in Isfahan and some different regions of Iran after a number of reports about air defense fire and explosions in different areas. So air defense systems activated in Isfahan, Qom, and a number of different areas. That's according to the latest reports. So we'll have to follow that and see what is going on there, because if Iran ends up getting back into this war, then there's going to be many more consequences that we're going to see. But at this point, the reason why Israel is escalating is because they simply have no answers, and they could either run away or they could escalate, and they have chosen to escalate. And the more they commit to the war against Lebanon, the worse it's going to get for them. Because we have to keep in mind that Hezbollah has an enormous arsenal still of ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, anti-ship missiles. And what it's been doing during this so-called ceasefire period is it's been targeting the Israeli air defense. It's continued to do that. Now, the Iranian ballistic missiles that we saw hitting Israeli positions, They drained a lot of the air defense. But what we've been witnessing over the past few weeks in particular is Hezbollah targeting the Iron Dome batteries themselves and the systems and the operators. And according to reports we've heard come through today in the Lebanese media, they're alleging that 6 different Iron Dome systems have been taken out by Hezbollah so far. Now, back in 2014, I think this was the latest time that we had statistics about how many Iron Dome systems the Israelis were operating throughout the country, and there was about 11 back then. I have a feeling that there's many more than that, evidently, at this point. But hitting just those batteries and destroying the batteries is the difference between perhaps engaging rockets that are going to hit an area like Kiryat Shimona or not. And so it's robbing them of their ability to confront other threats. And already they're suffering because their air defenses are not proving capable. For instance, those Iron Dome batteries, they're not proving successful at shooting down not just the FPVs, but the other variations of drones that are being fired from southern Lebanon. They're not proving successful, and they haven't proven successful at shooting them down. But now, if they can't even confront rockets because of the Iron Dome being taken out, they're going to be in a world of trouble, especially as things do continue to escalate. And so there has been a lot of pressure on the Israelis to escalate dramatically because, again, they're not capable of simply securing a small portion of territory in southern Lebanon and then going along this diplomatic route to try and achieve a symbolic victory by bringing a puppet Lebanese government to the table to sign a normalization agreement. They're obsessed with these normalization agreements, but it means absolutely nothing on the ground because you failed. And Israel has failed on every single front. They have no victories. They didn't win in Gaza against the Palestinian resistance. They just bombed all the buildings and killed civilians. They committed a genocide. They didn't go after and defeat Hamas or Islamic Jihad or the PFLP or any of those groups. In Lebanon, they haven't defeated Hezbollah. They haven't defeated the Iraqi resistance. They haven't defeated Iran. They haven't defeated Ansar Allah. In fact, they have so few options with Yemen that they, in a lot of cases, they didn't even bother returning fire against Yemen very frequently because it was a logistical nightmare and they had little to no intelligence. So, and they even tried to get the US to go after Yemen and it failed. They failed. Every front they're failing. And the only thing they know how to do is punish civilians. And so that is what we're seeing right now. And a lot of people frame this, and we see in the media a lot of pessimism about the state of affairs in the region. And of course, Israel is inflicting massive death and destruction, and that cannot be ignored. However, militarily, the Israelis are not winning. They're not. There's just no way that you can twist it to make it seem as if they're winning. They're just not. But again, they want that footage of bombed out buildings. They like the aerial footage being shown on Al Jazeera and the Arabi media in specific because they want to demoralize the Arab public. That is the whole purpose of what they're doing. So when you're watching TV and the news station is showing you devastation in Gaza and the civilian suffering in Gaza, part of what the Israeli calculation is they want you to see that. They want you to watch it. They want you to feel angry. They want you to feel sad. And the reason why is because it demoralizes you. If you constantly watch what they're doing, and then there's nothing in the way of anyone fighting back or doing anything against them back, then you will feel demoralized. You will feel frustrated and demoralized and not want to do anything. You're going to feel like they're winning. when that's not actually a victory. They haven't secured a single victory. Where is their victory? They assassinated some people. Did they destroy any group or any army or defeat any army? No, they didn't. All they did is kill civilians and then carried out some assassinations and some intelligence operations. Some tactical victories there, but not strategic. And this is what happens. This footage that you've just been shown, this is what happens to their army when they have to fight a formidable foe and someone that has the ability to defend and a supply chain and is capable. Basically, in Gaza, they were fighting an enemy that was besieged, was fighting with its own domestically produced weapons, which were light weapons, and had no way of resupplying itself. And its population were being subjected, the resistance, its population was being subjected to a genocide and mass starvation. And they were doing it out of tunnels. But the Israelis militarily are not winners. They're not brave. They're not sophisticated. They're not militarily even intelligent, to be honest, in their tactics. It's amateur hour for the Israeli army. Now, the Air Force, of course, and their intelligence community, and no one's doubting their capabilities. But ultimately, when we're looking at this in the long term, because these are wars of liberation, right? These are national liberation movements which are fighting to liberate their countries. If the resistance is not defeated, killing people and using airstrikes is not going to end the conflict. It's not going to inflict a defeat on the enemy. You have to do that with an army, and they can't. They can't do it. As you're seeing, they're getting cut down. And yeah, these drone strikes, they look pretty bad. But if we're going to transfer that, let's for a moment just zoom out. In the war between Russia and Ukraine, there's a lot more of those FPV drones being used, and by operators that have become more skilled than Hezbollah is with them, because they've been using them for years now. And they're inflicting an enormous amount of casualties on each other on the battlefield. And yet both sides, they're not complaining. They're not whining. They're not running away and abandoning their positions. They keep fighting. They keep fighting. The Israelis, they start whining and crying and moaning. And it's a big, they're sobbing and well, how did we not know, and how did we prepare? Let's put up fish nets to try and protect our precious soldiers. Oh no, we thought we could commit genocide, ethnic cleansing, and destroy their homes, and there would be no consequence. That's their mentality. In Russia and Ukraine, they're just firing at each other and just they just get on with it. Okay, all right, my buddy died. Let's keep going. The Israelis, it's a whole, because they're not an army. It's not a real army. It's a participation army, a participation trophy army, where recently there was I believe I don't know if he was a sergeant or whatever he was, Sergeant Hamburger, and that's actually his name, Hamburger, that was killed in battle. Well, I say in battle, he was hit by a drone. And Sergeant Hamburger, it was a big thing and like a massive loss, and you publish, oh my God, how did this happen? Well, you're invading someone else's country. So sometimes you're going to lose a Sergeant Hamburger, and, your 22-year-old captains and your 19-year-old sergeants, that you're going to lose them. Sometimes you're going to lose the participation army, members of your participation trophy army. That is going to happen. But again, they want to do this without any consequence. They want to do it without any consequence. And then when there are consequences, they can't cop it. And so you have the likes of Bezalel Smotrich today saying that every Israeli soldier hit by a drone should mean that 10 buildings are blown up in Beirut. Again, they just can't tolerate you started a war. You started killing their people. You occupied their land. You're destroying their homes and ethnically cleansing their people. But if they dare to fire a drone at your soldiers, you must bring down 10 buildings. Like, that's the mentality that is being dealt with here. And then we hear from our media, our Western media, that it's, the Israelis are the good guys and the democracy and all of this. And what we also hear from them is Bezalel Smotrich and even Netanyahu himself and Itamar Ben-Gvir are the bad apples. It's like, well, it's not bad apples. The entire tree is rotten. And it needs to be pulled out from its roots. The entire tree is rotten. Because it's not just Netanyahu that wants greater Israel. Yair Lapid, who's supposed to be the moderate of the opposition, the leader of the opposition, was also talking about greater Israel. But we should be smarter about the way that we do greater Israel and taking Iraqi territory. Yes, the moderate opposition is pondering, we should take not just Syrian territory, Lebanese territory, Gaza, West Bank. No. Iraq. How should we take Iraqi territory? That's what Israel is. That's the face of Israel. And now they're going, people are sort of seeing that, Ben-Gvir is sort of crazy, so let's just put it on Ben-Gvir. Well, no. When he says this is Israel, it's Israel. Was it Ben-Gvir who, according to the reports that we have right now, 15 of the international activists who were kidnapped in international waters by Israeli soldiers, 15 of them have complained and said that and testified to have been either raped or sexually assaulted. So that sexual assault and weaponized sexual violence, was that carried out by Itamar Ben-Gvir? Or was that carried out, if you had one case or two cases of it, against international activists, that's bad enough, because you should think in that situation, we need to be a little bit more gentle with them because of PR and all. They don't care. Even with international activists, when they put them in jail, they sexually abuse them. They torture them. They beat them. Even with international activists. The whole society, the whole army, which is connected to the society, it's a conscript army, is rotten to the core. And the sooner people understand that, the sooner the solution comes. Because it is not normal. It is not normal for there to be no repercussions, no sanctions. No, you withdraw your ambassadors, you summon your diplomatic envoys, but you then, some of these countries that did it are still part of the CMCC, the Civil Military Coordination Center, watching Israel commit war crimes in Gaza during a ceasefire during which Israel has killed over 900 people in Gaza. There needs to be accountability, but again, they want to try and say, there's nothing wrong with Israel. There's nothing wrong with the Israeli army. There's nothing wrong with the Israeli government system and everything. There's nothing wrong with that. Well, there is, because in the Knesset, they can openly advocate for raping Palestinians, and nothing's done. That's an Israeli politician can do that. They can have protests in favor of gang raping a Palestinian detainee. They have comedians mocking the idea and talking about staying on code and not talking about it if you do things in the army. You have Israeli TV channels hosting these people as if they're celebrities, the accused gang rapists who did it on camera, on film. It was all filmed. But no, it's Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's the crazy one. Yeah, is it that he's crazy, and Netanyahu, no, he just went the wrong way or something. No. Because all of the opposition, Benny Gantz, for instance, he was part of the war cabinet doing the genocide in Gaza. Again, Yair Lapid open on record about the Greater Israel, discussing openly in public about taking Iraqi territory. There is a problem that has to be understood. When a country can simply go and threaten and then carry out those actions against another capital like Beirut, bomb them constantly, violate a ceasefire with Lebanon 15,400 times, monitored by UNIFIL. When a country can just do that and then openly make genocidal statements, its officials make genocidal statements after the ceasefire eventually deteriorated, that's more ceasefire violations, by the way, than have ever been committed in any conflict, in any ceasefire in human history. And there are no repercussions, none. We've just, a few bad apples, a few ceasefire violations. Really, a few ceasefire violations? Oh, yeah, we can ignore that. But if the other side do one, then, the whole world is ended. So as, again, we're on this stream here, it does look like there have been attacks that have been committed against Iran. We're trying to see, there's no confirmation of exactly what has happened. There are now reports that more MQ-9 Reaper drones were just shot down over Bandar Abbas in southern Iran. So the Iranian air defenses shot down some drones, and the strikes will be occurring on Beirut, and the tensions will continue to escalate there. One last piece of footage that I had, which was published by Hezbollah, and we haven't done the disclaimer yet in this live stream, but I thought it would actually be good to do them each episode just so it's on record. This is not an endorsement. This is for viewers' knowledge. So this footage was published by Hezbollah. Since we saw you last Thursday here, this is from 2000. So obviously the year that South Lebanon was liberated. And then they're showing different scenes of the resistance in South Lebanon all the way back to 1986 against the Israeli occupation. And they're showing these scenes to remind their population what they went through, that this has been an ongoing event. It's not just in 2026. This was happening again. This resistance against occupation was happening 40 plus years ago. Here's another, again, operation in 1993. They're just showing footage here. So Hezbollah has been waging this resistance against the Israeli occupation for a very long period of time. And throughout the years, this is something that there was a brief break. I say not a brief break, but a break after 2006, where the Israelis were deterred for a period of time. But Lebanon was under Israeli occupation, and there was organic resistance throughout those years since the 80s to the Israeli occupiers until the year 2000, when Hezbollah managed to liberate the south of the country. Israel withdrew, and it didn't withdraw without great pressure. So this footage, them having released it to commemorate that on the day of the liberation of the South Lebanon, it's quite significant. And then here we go in the year 2000. And again, just to remind everyone, this is something that has been going on for a very long time. And when Israel talks about destroying Hezbollah and like it just talks about destroying Hamas and the Palestinian resistance, that's just not how it works. You don't kill civilians and then suddenly assassinate some leaders and suddenly you have removed a resistance that has been there for decades. And in the case of the Palestinian resistance, it's been there even longer, of course. So just wanted to play those clips there. And we will be back on Thursday to address more of the news. I'm seeing a lot of information flood in right now, but I think we will leave it there for today. And we will be addressing more of the breaking developments, bringing that to you. And we will, of course, make sure to stay tuned with the latest developments with the resistance from Lebanon and Palestine and beyond as it comes in. And so thank you to everyone for watching and staying tuned. If you have stayed tuned if you've been here this long and you're still with us, please do hit that like button, share this video, and make sure to comment as well and help us out in the algorithms. So thank you to everyone, and we will see you the same place, the same time on Thursday. Thank you.